So Caren, hey, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Karis. Just barely morning here in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I'm doing all right. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I know we're just getting to know each other, but the conversations that I've had with you over the past, what has it been like? Maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But point being, they have, I mean, they've been fun conversations. They've been serious conversations. We get work done. And then, we also learn a little bit about each other. So I've just really enjoyed them. And you are one of the people who gave me the inspiration to even think about doing a podcast like this. So thank you for that. I bow down before you.
Oh, Karis, I actually think the world of you and had heard so many great things about you before I heard your voice or saw your face. And when you testified for Ways and Means Committee, I was like, oh, she's Black. It was just like such a nice surprise. And you were one of the first people with subject matter expertise in this field that I look to for a little bit of leadership. So know that I admire you.
That's hilarious. I'll never forget when you told me that. It was like, yeah, I saw you. And I was like, wait a minute, she's Black. And then, of course, I had not met you before either. I'm like, well, wait a minute, she's Black. So we were having this moment of, oh my God, we're two Black people like doing this work in mental health in leadership roles where we can make a difference. And we didn't know each other. So that is kind of the essence of finding the unapologetically Black unicorns. And I think you are an unapologetically Black unicorn. So, and woo, yay. So one of the things that, I've always been interested in, especially is how we sometimes get into what it is that we do. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially in the mental health field, people with lived experience and other folks is how do they get into the policy work? I find that so interesting. I fell into it. I didn't study it. I didn't even understand it. People had to mentor me to understand that policy, where policy drives practice. Kind of knew it intuitively, but I didn't really understand that there were roles that people could play that are specifically around policy. So how did you get into that?
So very good question. Did not necessarily envision or dream of myself working in policy and advocacy. In fact, sometimes I pinch myself like, this is kind of too cool to be true. I went to undergrad for engineering and science stuff, and through discussions with some kind of socially apt friends, I realized that my appetite for involvement in the community organizing space was strong. And then after Bush won the second election in 2006, I guess, I was just floored after his poor handling of so many other things. I just thought that this country needed different kind of leadership. And I vowed to do what I could to learn as much as I could about our political process, our political systems, how everyday people can get involved, what do you do beyond voting? And I kind of just followed that path and took my friend's, ambition of working on the Hill as a senator. And I said, well, I can learn about that too. So just by kind of exploring that territory of seeing what political campaigns were like, seeing what the legislative branch side was like, working for state legislature and Congress, I realized like, oh, this world is very important and not one that I really knew anything about. So I want to stay here for at least now. And working on the Hill means that you typically have a broad portfolio as a legislative assistant of like maybe at least 6 to 10 issue areas. And I realized, well, this isn't the place for me because the thing I care about most is mental health care. So I got a little bit of audacity to talk to my bosses about mental health. And I got to start taking those meetings and researching those bills, and then networking with the people that came into the offices to take meetings. And I realized, well, I don't really want to work in the member's office. I want to be on the other side advocating on behalf of the people whose voices are not being heard. So through networking and some connections, especially with coalition leadership, I was able to land at my current organization. And it's been a dream come true.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I love the word that you said, I had the audacity. Well, you go, girl. It's like that is the essence of being an unapologetically Black unicorn, is having a bit of audacity. But it sounds like you really forged forth to kind of make your path. So why mental health, though?
So I experienced some kind of nervousness, anxiousness after a traumatic incident. My mom died as a child. I was 9, she was 45. And my dad, I talked to adults about it and they just kind of shook it off, like not really knowing what was going on. I went to the school counselor in high school. And then by the time I got to undergrad, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And I realized I was so scared to talk about it because I thought I would be blamed, I would be shamed, I would be judged. And then it was also difficult to stay in care because my insurance company gave me this limitation and I had to keep calling and asking for permission to get care. And I was an athlete. I played volleyball, track and field, basketball. So I had broken ankles. I had sprained limbs. Like, it was nothing to go to the hospital or doctor and get physical health care. Why was I experiencing all of this difficulty in getting mental health care? And then I had a couple conversations with my interns and with other people in the community. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. And everybody knows it. Mental illness is on both sides of my family. My father has 12 brothers and sisters. My mother had 9 brothers and sisters. They're both from big families down south who, participated in sharecropping and other things to bring in money for the family. And nobody wants to talk about what we're all dealing with. Let's do something different. I also thought it was a means to economic empowerment, because if we're losing productivity and connection, and that ends up with some people being on disability, being unable to work, being unable to stay in school, then it becomes economic. So I think for families, which are all families, but for families who are experiencing loss, trauma, and then eventually mental health conditions, even psychosis or struggling with mood disorders, like, there are ways to help, and we're basically forcing people to not be able to get the help that they need because of the insurance barriers, the shame, the kind of segregation of mental health care. And I just thought, this is truly a civil rights issue and an economic issue for me that's important enough to let all the other issues fall by the wayside. Because what's more important than human being?
Yeah.
There's nothing more important than human being. I care about the environment. I care about transportation issues. I care about education. I care about tax reform. But what's more important than healthcare and human being? Nothing. And I didn't realize I was getting into the most complex policy issue area.
Yeah, could it be any more complex? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's so interesting because very similar to you, when I first started having symptoms, I think it was okay for me to talk about being depressed. It's a word we can say. It's a word in the dictionary that doesn't really mean that there's something drastically wrong with you. We can have sad days. We can have, and my mom said, my mom was, one of these people. She says, yeah, you were born sad. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Thanks a lot, Mom. I was born sad. She goes, no, well, you always had these sad eyes. And so it wasn't hard for her to understand when I said I was sad. That wasn't hard.
Mm-hmm.
But, when it became a point where I was struggling with hearing voices, that was a whole different matter of me not wanting to tell my parents, not wanting to tell my friends. I had seen so many different things on TV about, people who hear voices. It was the person who was homeless and dirty in the street, quite frankly. I mean, it was those kind of stereotypical images, the person who was screaming at somebody, the person in Law and Order who had always killed somebody. That's the storyline that I was like, okay, wait a second. I'm not telling anybody about what's going on, for this very same reasons of shame and really thinking that my parents wouldn't love me, like the people who love me the most and stick by me no matter what. For some odd reason, I thought, they're not going to love me. And I could get my friends not liking me. I could get that. They don't have to like me. They're not like blood, right? This is my, blood. So that really resonates when you talk about sort of, and especially in our community, in Black and Brown communities, sort of the extra burden of the shame. It's almost like an extra burden. And I also like the fact that you put it together with wealth, that, we have the safety net. And for me, sometimes I look at the safety net, which could be, SSI, SSDI, et cetera, and other benefits that can come with somebody who's on disability, that sometimes, when you have a mental illness, it's like, yes, you're going to go on disability and we're going to keep assessing it. So the safety net almost for me became an entrapment. I had to figure out how to get the heck out because, being on disability was also living in poverty and trying to figure out how do you stay well when it's almost you're subjugated to poverty because of the way that especially serious mental illnesses are kind of in specialty mental health over there and everybody else is over here.
Right.
Yes. Right. And then, that is it separate and equal? Yeah, no, I don't think so. So I think you're totally right about the complexities.
Yeah. And the more I learned about how people with mental health conditions and mental illnesses were ending up homeless or in jail or in and out of jail and hospitals, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. If anyone looks at the research and kind of the path that people follow at times, it's like, why would we allow this to happen? If money is so important in America, why would we be wasting money on putting people in jails and traumatizing them rather than offering some type of solutions for hope? It just doesn't make any sense.
So why do you think that it's acceptable or somehow it feels acceptable?
I think it comes down to the same thought process when you see someone homeless and you pass by them on the street. It's not me, so why should I care? It's somewhat of the kind of lack of understanding and compassion that really drives the top upper echelon to continue to be billionaires and exploit labor. It's because, well, it's okay if a few don't make it because the rest of us will. Wow. And almost like, why should I stop and sacrifice all that I'm working towards, all that I'm working for someone else?
Yeah. And out here too, well, not just out here, but a lot of times homelessness issues are, well, you see, those are all the mentally ill people, quote unquote. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. That could be the person who half a paycheck away ended up kind of not being able to remain in SROs, those hotel like vouchers where you get them for every night. You have to do it every day. They might not qualify for other housing assistance, or some people do choose to be on the streets. But do you not think that could traumatize a person, that can cause also depression and stress?
I think that's the point.
And not everybody started out that way.
And many people are one paycheck away from, one medical bill away from not being able to meet their housing needs. And the safety net has just vanished, really, in many ways because of how expensive everything is now. And this since the 70s, everything has gone up. The cost of everything has gone up. except for wages. Wages are the only thing that have stayed the same. And while our productivity, I think the Economic Policy Institute released a study this week that said productivity has gone up over 200% since 1973. However, wages have stayed the same, and the food prices go up, and inflation goes up, and gas goes up, and housing goes up. And this all becomes a mental health issue for me, because you're going to be in a state of distress thinking about, how does all of this work out? How can I operate if I'm making this much, but I need this much to keep my housing?
Yeah.
Or if I'm living with family, I have to contribute this much, and they might make me crazy too.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with all these other folks and personalities and perhaps traumatic, triggering situations, and you're really just trying to make ends meet.
That's the beauty of peer respite, though, right? Kind of introducing yet another thing into the conversation is, sometimes when people need a break from the things that are in their home, and I say things, it could be, yes, the people. That's why I live by myself with a dog, but sometimes it's the people, who are kind of in your house and you love them and they love you, but sometimes you just need a freaking break. And peer respite is so beautiful for that, because, you're around people who understand those stressors, who maybe have been through them themselves, and can support you. I used to go to a hotel. That was my big thing. When I need a break, or when I kind of need wow, I have to just step away. I need somebody to...
You need a change in scenery.
I need somebody to make my bed, because I do like a made bed. I really do. But
all right.
Yes, that is one thing this unicorn must have. Thank you, Mom. But, I need somebody to cook my food. I just can't do it. I'm just at the point, I just can't do it. I need to be taken care of. It sounds really weird, but yes, I need to be taken care of. And a lot of times people said, well, that means you need to go to the hospital. And I'm thinking, ew, no. I need something different than... It's not hospital. When I say need a break, it's almost like saying, I need a vacation. Hospital is not a vacation. So, and they don't make your bed for you anyway.
Yeah.
They do when you go off.
It's not really a comfortable place.
No, it's not. It's not. So that was kind of how I got my respite. It's a very expensive respite to have. Peer respites are a little bit different, same kind of level of hospitality and welcoming, but extra support too. So you can talk about all this stuff that might be going on in your life and try to come to some problem solving, get connected to resources and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of peer respites. I wish there were more, especially now as the pandemic is lifting. I think people are going to be finding and needing more supports for their emotional well-being, quite frankly.
Yeah, you can think of a peer respite almost as like a time to retreat or have a change in scenery. And I've been doing advocacy, and we both have, to help policymakers understand the idea of peer-run support, peer supports such as peer respite.
Yeah.
And it's not general knowledge. This is not something that an everyday person would know. So I think having conversations with our legislators, our elected officials, is just so important, because they don't know everything. And a good one will say that. They will say, I don't know the answer, but I want to hear from you what you think we should be doing. And that time to listen and to take note of the ideas of what's working on the ground is really what informs good policy.
Right.
One of the things that oftentimes happens in policy is people that have no idea what happens on the ground comes up with the structure and framework for how a system or operation will work.
Yes.
And it has typically unintended consequences that might harm us, especially people of color, especially people who might be LGBTQ. They just don't think about how systems might be violent or traumatic for us. So taking time to weigh in is really important. And it's not easy. trying to build in 30 minutes to write a letter, to get your thoughts down on paper, it's not easy when you're running. You might be working 2 jobs to make income. You might have kids. You might have demands at work. You might not be a good writer. That you have to kind of go into a different part of your brain, or at least I do, to write something cohesively. And it takes me a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need that push. We don't necessarily have a lot of education about that civic process. And sometimes we lose faith in our leaders too because of the corruption and other issues that have come up that show that, okay, am I really a priority to y'all? Because it seems like y'all don't care about Black people.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I think in policy, we have to become the policymakers.
Yes.
We do. It's really important. Just like in the justice system, we have to become the judges. In the banking system, we have to become the financiers. We have to overcome challenges and barriers, and we have to be twice as good to get on equal footing with white people oftentimes. But I think once we have started to see a new kind of renaissance of Blacks in leadership. Chiquita Brooks LaSure
is
the first Black woman CMS administrator since the 60s and 70s at the federal level. So it's kind of a rebirth, I think, that we're having, that I think we have to value, and we have to keep those gains and really keep striving, because it's possible. But we still see our demonstrators and social disruptors being killed. I mean, we have people being kidnapped in states like Tennessee and Kentucky and Georgia. We have people who are intimidated and killed just for being in the neighborhoods, like Ahmaud Arbery. So there is violence that we are overcoming. But I do think that a part of policy is learning about what position of leadership you want to be in so that you can be a part of that conversation.
Yeah. That's a really, really powerful message, and one that I had to learn. Sometimes I just tripped into my positions, not really thinking about, what is it that I want to do and how is it that I want to get there. I think I told you that my dream job when I was a kid was to be a mom, which is like, it is a dream job. Aww. It is a dream job. Okay. All right. I have a dog. I'm a mom to a dog. Okay, fine. But in fact, my dream was to be a mom of 12 kids, because it was just my brother and I, and we lived mainly overseas, moving every 3 years. So we had to be each other's best friends. We had to keep making friends over and over and over again.
Oh, wow.
If we wanted to do a pickup game of basketball, we kind of had to find people to do that. And I thought, well, if I gave birth to 12 kids, this is before I knew how kids were born. So let's just be clear. Right? Once I figured that out, I was like, okay, maybe I'll be adopting some. They're all not coming out of my body. But but that's kind of what I wanted to do, was to have all of these kids and kind of recreate a little bit the experience I had of growing up around the world, but making sure that the kids had kind of like their buddies in family. But, in fact, that didn't happen because of sort of the interruption of a mental illness and just all sorts of stuff. So I sort of didn't know what I was going to do until I met other people and got involved in the mental health movement and started to see a lack of leadership of people who look like me that were having different experiences in the mental health treatment arena as Black folk. I was just treated differently. And I saw, some other just people treated differently who were Black and brown. And I thought, okay, well, this isn't right. And for anybody, wasn't seeing sort of this belief that people could get better, could move off of disability, could move into different roles. And then I became more intentional about kind of what I was doing. And, so appreciated that I got the opportunity to meet you. And then you asked me, well, wait, are there other Black people out here like us? And I was like, oh, yes, girl, I have met them. So so started doing this.
And you've introduced me to a lot of them. And I did not see them. I did not see our history being told. I did not see them in the historical videos and documents that I was reading. I did not even get to visit them, because I started doing kind of like tours. I started touring like peer run facilities and just learning about what behavioral health run organizations were doing. And I just did not see a lot of Black folks. We were receiving the services, but we
Yes,
weren't leading them.
that's right.
And I
Yes.
think for me, it wasn't, yeah, I didn't have like a direct line to the policy world. I just got to try different things and realize, okay, no, that's not for me. Yes, that's for me. No, that's not for me. Well, what about this? I'm interested in this. And talking to folks. And there's one woman who worked in the Maryland delegation with me who actually left the policy world and then went to get her social work degree and actually provide, services through like in the community through ACT teams and other things. And her overall goal was to come back to policy once she got that experience in the field. And I thought, that's how it should be done. That's who we should be highlighting, and we should create this kind of pathway for learning about what's happening on the ground and then coming back to make policy and shape policy. And so I think there's some kind of good characteristics to think about if policy is the world for you. So are you a good listener? Are you flexible? Do you like working with different people and different organizations? And kind of, do you find similarities between ideas? Do you cross kind of like relate one thing to another in your head as someone is talking, like, oh yeah, that relates to this, which relates to that? I think finding those cross connections are really useful and something that people in policy do. I'll also say it's having a personality that can be amenable to collaboration and teamwork, because that's just so important in policy. Just having the openness and willingness to work across the aisle, work with people that don't look like you, work with being open.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I think in my head is sort of, I've been looking at this and looking at different people and seeing how the different movements are working. That's the one thing I did too, is look back at, well, how did the civil rights movement work? How did the women's movement work? How did the LGBT movement work? The consumer movement is not new. And as a matter of fact, it says it has its foundation and basis from some of these other movements. So I thought that was really powerful to be part of a movement. That's kind of cool, right? So, and I also think
and we need that.
Yeah, and I also think, some people will make, very good inside advocates. I'm an inside advocate person, and possibly inside advocates also are really good policy people, because they have to figure out all sides of an issue. They have to be able to get on and kind of communicate with people who they disagree with or who disagree with them, and I think then there are outside advocates where it may be sort of, it's a message and you're driving home that message. And it doesn't matter that if you disagree with me, I'm going to hound you like a dog because you disagree with me, and maybe I attack you, or maybe I do whatever to kind of make my point. And I think that's needed too. So I think you're bringing up a really good point about, if this is your skill set, being able to be flexible, being able to communicate with different people on both sides of the aisle, being able to put disparate things together and kind of make sense of it and then communicate it out. If that's your skill set, then maybe inside advocacy or policy is really good. If that's not your skill set and that's not of interest to you, that's okay too, because the outside activist, like straight up activist work, is really powerful too. I think we need both. It's kind of like,
absolutely,
putting pressure kind of from both inside and outside, which is kind of cool.
And I think you need both, because without the street demonstrations, protests, the rallies, you're not going to keep folks' attention on the issue. When people see, oh, there are people with signs outside again today, they're going to take note of that. They're going to remember that. But then you also need to be able to be at the table and have conversations where you can disagree agreeably, but try to find the common ground.
Right. Well, you know what? I have so enjoyed this conversation, Caren. It has been just an honor to be able to get to know you and to work with you. I just love our conversations when we're kind of getting to the meat of things. And
Yay.
so, yay, yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's amazing. And there's still much work to be done. So I hope this really provides people sort of a way forward to think about, wow, how could I be involved? That maybe my role in some of this work is going to be outside advocacy, or no, wait, I want to learn more about policy, maybe, inside advocacy. But most importantly, to give hope to people that, there are folks like you who are doing the hard work. You're doing that unapologetically Black unicorn thing. I wish I could give everybody a little unicorn horn, and say, and here's your, I am not the owner of a Black unicorn-ness, but, if I could knight you Black unicorn, I would do so.
Oh.
So I think you've left us with some really great ideas and thoughts forward. So thanks for spending some time with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Paris, I will see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Caren. We just again want to thank you and encourage everybody to join us again next week. We'll be here on Unapologetically Black Unicorns.